Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. For the first time since the invasion of Ukraine, the Russian forces have been pushed on the back foot in Crimea. There have been two back-to-back attacks in the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia has tried to explain away as accidental explosions and sabotage. To be clear, a pushback on the battlefield is never an accident. The first incident happened on the 10th of August, where 11 Russian fighter jets that were stationed at the Saki air base in Crimea were destroyed. The 4 Su-30 multi-role fighter jets and 7 Su-24 bombers are the biggest loss of military aircraft from Moscow in a single day since the Second World War. Russia has tried to explain this incident as blasts caused by aviation ammunition without any more explanations. What makes this incident so daring is that it happened at least 225 kilometers behind the battle lines. According to some analysts, this attack looks like it was carried out remotely with the help of drones. Ukraine has not directly claimed responsibility for the attack, but its air force has gloated over the Russian losses.
Of course, such things cannot help but please us, and we hope that the enemy will get rid of not only the military machinery, but also the flight personnel, which happened in the city of Saki. It is clear that in addition to the 10-plus planes that burned there, probably a considerable number of personnel were also destroyed. These are pilots and engineering and technical staff. Therefore, even if Russia can deliver new planes, there may be problems with specialists because their preparation takes much longer.
Since then, there have been a series of mysterious and devastating blasts in occupied Crimea. Thick smoke billowed over the skyline of Zankoy as a series of explosions rocked the Russian ammunition depot. Rail traffic was disrupted and over 3,000 people had to be evacuated.
When the explosion started, we were suggested to leave, but we did not want to. We thought that we would work it out somehow, nothing terrible. But when a shell landed close to us, we just spooked. 2 militaries came and said, "Come on, pack up, please leave for life, for everything." They opened the gates for us and we got in the car and came here.
Now, Russia has alleged that the explosions at the ammunition depot are a work of sabotage. It is unclear as to how Ukraine has managed to strike Russian military targets with such impunity. The US-supplied HIMARS systems have a range of just 50 miles. But the new reality of the war is that Russia's military assets in occupied Crimea are suddenly looking vulnerable. Crimea is the crown piece of Vladimir Putin's territorial gains in Ukraine. But Volodymyr Zelensky, who for several weeks now had been talking of a counter-offensive against Russian occupation, has finally got something to boast about.
Every day and night we receive new reports of explosions on the temporarily occupied territories. I am urging all our people in Crimea, in other occupied regions in the south, in Donbas and Kharkiv region to be very careful. Please do not approach the military infrastructure of the Russian army and all those places where they store ammunition and equipment, where they have set up their headquarters.
But Ukraine isn't just fighting back in Crimea. Tensions are high at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as well. Ukraine has accused Russia of shelling at the nuclear plant, despite the fact that it is the Russian soldiers who are in charge at the nuclear facility. Why would Russia want to shell a nuclear facility that it presently controls is something that Ukraine must explain, even as it makes these allegations. Tactically, Russia has been pushed on the back foot. But that has not stopped the shelling and the missile strikes that Moscow has been carrying out in other Ukrainian cities. In Kharkiv, 6 people were reportedly killed and 16 others were wounded after a shell struck a residential area. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry has tweeted this video, accusing Russia of using phosphorus ammunition, but it has provided no further details on the area where this phosphorus ammunition was used. Russia for the last several months had been gaining ground steadily, but the mysterious explosions and destruction of military assets in the Crimean Peninsula has suddenly made the Russian position much more vulnerable in the southern flank. The question, of course, is, can Ukraine press ahead with more such daring attacks against the Russian war machine? The Taiwan Strait has been rocked by the biggest Chinese military drills that we've witnessed so far. What is interesting is that on the face of it, neither the Pentagon nor the White House had encouraged Nancy Pelosi to visit Taiwan. And yet just 12 days later, after Nancy Pelosi's visit, on the 14th of August, a 5-member congressional delegation touched down in Taiwan for a 2-day visit. The visit was reportedly unannounced, but was calculated to add insult to injury. The Chinese war games, which had lost a bit of pace, again picked up in their intensity. Washington's stated policy on Taiwan is strategic ambiguity, and the message that it has sent across with the delegation is that the United States is not going to pull back in the face of China's muscle flexing. But the Taiwanese president, who's both overjoyed by the US support and also concerned with the Chinese ballistic missiles flying over the Taiwanese territory for the very first time, has struck a more cautious note.
Not only do we work closely with allies around the world and closely control all military developments around us, we also continue to express to the international community Taiwan's determination to maintain the status quo of stability across the Taiwan Strait.
Taiwan has responded to China's fire and fury by conducting its own war games. In this video, Taiwanese airmen at the Key Hualien Air Base are training with the Swiss-made GDF-006 anti-aircraft guns and also the Tiankung III anti-aircraft system, a complex missile setup that can intercept both missiles and fighter jets. Taiwan also decided to show off its best fighter jets that will take to the skies as and when the Chinese planes resort to intruding into the Taiwanese air defense identification zone.
The tension between the Taiwan Strait is getting higher, and it's obvious in knowing that. But that's still what we're training for, and it's what we're preparing for. So they come and we rise, and so our scramble jet will never stop, and we will stop their offender and outside our defense outside our ADIZ.
Nancy Pelosi's visit has sparked off the fourth and so far the worst crisis in the Taiwan Strait. The United States is resorting to mixed messaging. In the 1972 Shanghai Communique, the United States had agreed to the one China principle that Beijing professes. Every time Joe Biden has committed to defending Taiwan militarily, the White House has walked back on the president's word by citing strategic ambiguity as America's official policy. Washington must come clear on how far up the escalation ladder it is willing to climb. With every poke in the eye of the Chinese dragon on the issue of its sovereignty, the United States is pushing Taiwan into Beijing's line of fire. And unless the United States officially sheds its policy of strategic ambiguity on Taiwan, there is no guarantee that the United States won't do with Taipei what it did with Kiev, that is to abandon it to a marauding aggressor. China's spy ship Yuan 5 has been allowed to dock at the Sri Lankan port of Hambantota. In the wake of the many serious security concerns raised by India, Sri Lanka made a half-hearted attempt to get China to indefinitely defer the docking of Yuan 5. But in the end, Colombo crumbled under the Chinese checkbook. The Yuan 5 is a type of high-tech surveillance ship that begins to move when a country wants to track the launch of satellites and intercontinental ballistic missiles. According to reports, the Yuan 5 has almost about 2,000 sailors on board. Officially, it is at the Hambantota port for replenishment purposes from the 16th till the 22nd of August. But here is the irony. India gifted a Dornier aircraft to Sri Lanka just a day before for maritime and coastal surveillance operations.
We have seen a further expansion of the role of Sri Lanka's Air Force. This is the start of a cooperation between our Air Force, and Navy, and the Indian Navy in maritime surveillance. You've taken over charge of an aircraft which belongs to the Indian Navy, and by next year you will have a gift of your own Dornier aircraft. So first and foremost, I must thank the Indian government and also the Indian Navy.
The Indian Ocean is nowhere in the vicinity of China, and yet China has been seeking to expand into the Indian Ocean region by exploiting the financially vulnerable nations. The usual taunt put forth by Beijing is that it is the Indian Ocean and not India's ocean. In the last 2 decades, China has meticulously gone about crafting a string of pearls to encircle India. When plotted on a map, these military and commercial facilities developed by China will give you an idea of how these Chinese assets will come into play in case of a conflict. China has its presence in Myanmar's Kyokpyu port. Although a commercial maritime facility on the Bay of Bengal, this can easily be used as a military facility in the time of conflict. China has also built an intelligence gathering base at the Coco Islands, north of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. These islands belong to Myanmar, but they've been leased to China since 1994. They're situated at a crucial point in traffic routes between the Bay of Bengal and the Strait of Malacca. Hambantota is a part of the Chinese string of pearls. Funded by $1.3 billion of Chinese cash, Colombo was forced to lease out this strategically important port to Beijing for a period of 99 years in 2017. In 2016, Maldives leased out the Fedu Finolu Island to the Chinese till 2066 for a princely sum of $4 million. And since then, through a process of land reclamation, the size of the island has increased from 38,000 square meters to over 1,000 square meters. The development of this artificial island mirrors the Chinese actions on the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. What is interesting is that China initially denied any militarization of the Fedu Finolu Island, but it later acknowledged creating a military base there and justified it as a natural right of any sovereign nation. In Pakistan, China has developed the Gwadar port as a part of the CPEC. Gwadar is just a tip of the iceberg of Chinese designs. Not only can China assist the Pakistani Navy from the Gwadar port, it can also launch an offensive using Gwadar in case of a Sino-Indian conflict. China also has a military base in the African nation of Djibouti. So how has India responded to this Chinese encirclement? It has done so through some hard-nosed diplomacy. New Delhi has tried to snip through the Chinese pearl string. In April 2022, India gained access to the key port of Chittagong in Bangladesh for greater connectivity for the landlocked states of Assam and Tripura. This was a major coup for Indian diplomacy, for China had been hoping that Chittagong would slip and be woven as one more pearl on its string. India has also developed the Seethway port in Myanmar as a counter to China's Kyokpyu port in the vicinity. In February 2021, India pipped China to sign a deal with the Maldives to develop, support and maintain a harbour at the Uturu Tilla Falhu naval base in the island nation. India has developed the Chabahar port in Iran as a counter to the Chinese Gwadar port, but American sanctions on Iran have complicated matters for New Delhi. What China is doing in the Indian Ocean region is symptomatic of the Chinese dragon that is sensing its opportunity. In the South China Sea, it has actively bullied the smaller nations to toe its line as it has gone about militarizing the islands. China is also expanding its footprint in the Pacific through a security deal with the Solomon Islands. To counter China, the United States has tried to stitch up alliances. The Quad, comprising of the United States, India, Japan and Australia, is not a military alliance. Its stated objective is to counter the belligerence of China for a free, open and a prosperous Indo-Pacific. The United States has also forged the AUKUS military alliance with the United Kingdom and Australia. This is a geostrategic standoff that will not resolve itself for years and perhaps decades to come. In the past, Chinese military and dual-purpose vessels have been found lurking in the waters of the Indian Ocean region. A Chinese nuclear-powered submarine being allowed to dock at Colombo in 2014 had sparked a diplomatic flashpoint between New Delhi and Colombo. In its time of crisis, India has been a generous friend for the Sri Lankan people, while Beijing has behaved like a calculative creditor. Sri Lanka is the gateway to the Indian Ocean region for China, and India, through diplomacy and a naval build-up, must make it abundantly clear to Colombo that Chinese military and dual-purpose vessels are simply not welcome. The United States this week tested its nuclear-capable Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile. According to the US military, it did this to validate and verify the US's nuclear weapon system's effectiveness and safety. But nuclear deterrence depends not just on having ICBMs that are capable of carrying nuclear payloads. For this, a nation must have missiles that are harder to shoot down by anti-missile systems. So how does the United States fare on this front? Our next report gets you the details.
Item 128, Hunter, close your door, open. Item 129.
This is a missile test which the United States carries out a total of 4 times every year. On the 16th of August, sharp at 12:49 a.m., an unarmed but nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile, the Minuteman III, blasted off from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. It traveled a distance of 6,759 kilometers over the Pacific before hitting its target at the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. This was a routine test, and according to reports, the United States so far has carried out this test a total of 300 times. The Minuteman III represents the land leg of the US nuclear triad. Along with the Trident II submarine launched ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons that are carried out by long-range strategic bombers like the B-52 and B-2 that complete the United States nuclear triad. The Minuteman III has been in service since 1970. It weighs a hefty 36 tons, has a range of 10,000 kilometers. It can carry 3 payloads and can detonate on impact or in mid-air. But recent hypersonic missile tests by Russia and China have raised some serious questions on what nuclear deterrence actually means. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are launched on large rockets. Their trajectory is predictable. They can be detected early in their flight, and this allows for more time for an ICBM to be tracked and intercepted by anti-missile systems. But hypersonic missiles are different. They fly in a trajectory that is lower down to the Earth. It is possible to maneuver them throughout their flight, which makes it much harder to track them in their flight. The Satan II that was test-fired by Russia on the 20th of April is a hypersonic missile with an estimated range of 18,000 kilometers. It can fly at a speed of 6 times the speed of sound. And if fired by Russia, it has the potential to devastate any European capital in a span of less than 200 seconds. And what is more, the Satan II, according to Russian claims, can be maneuvered in mid-flight, making it that much harder to detect and intercept.
The new system has the highest tactical and technical characteristics and is capable of overcoming all modern anti-missile defense systems. It has no parallels in the world and will not have them for a long time. This truly unique weapon will strengthen the combat potential of our armed forces, reliably ensure the security of Russia from external threats, and make those who, in the heat of aggressive rhetoric, try to threaten our country, think twice.
The American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin initially dismissed the use of hypersonic missiles as a nuclear overkill and not a game changer. But increasingly, military analysts now point out that hypersonic missiles could potentially change the balance of power in nuclear deterrence. China has the mid-range hypersonic boost glide vehicle, the Dongfeng 17, that it displayed at the Beijing military parade in October 2019. Retired General John Hyten, who served as the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, highlighted that in the last 5 years, China had carried out hundreds of hypersonic missile tests. While the United States, with the biggest military budget in the world, is still years away from deploying a hypersonic missile of its own. Although in July earlier this year, the United States did conduct a successful test of a Raytheon Technologies Corp air-breathing hypersonic weapon, technological superiority often trumps big military budgets and large-scale military deployments. The Minuteman III is expected to be replaced by 2029. But until the United States can match Russia and China's hypersonic deployment, there is a chink in America's formidable military might.
In the conclusion of this show, I'd like to tell you about a war that dominated the global headlines for the last 2 decades. But now, it has been overshadowed by other conflicts. 15th August this year marked 1 year since the return of the Taliban to Kabul. So how has life changed for the people of Afghanistan in the last 1 year? The war in Afghanistan has been about many things, but principally, it's been a war on women. The return of the Taliban has meant that the Afghan women have again lost some of their most basic rights. Women are out of work and girls are out of school. So on the 15th of August, a bunch of brave Afghan women took to the streets of Kabul. The demands were simple: work, bread and dignity. The most basic needs for any human to lead a life of purpose. But the Taliban fighters resorted to firing in the air to disperse the women protesters. The glare of the world's cameras has now moved away from Kabul. But for the women of Afghanistan, this is going to be a long and a hard battle. Thanks for watching World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, suggestions or feedback, you can do so by tweeting to me on my Twitter handle that you see on your screens. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and we'll meet again in the next episode.